Thank God this is just a box. The actual graphics card is sitting on the ground right there. Woo! What's up everybody, my name's Danon and welcome to Ahnestly. I have seen a lot of videos on how to build a PC, but not a ton of videos on how to build a small form factor PC. Better yet, I haven't seen a lot of videos on how to build the fastest small form factor PC possible using budget / moderately priced parts. So that's what this video is about. Let's get honest. Part of the reason for this build is because my dream PC that I built recently is blinding my wife at night. So my office is in the bedroom and she's like, those white lights are killing me. Can you please do something about it? And I was like, well, I could build another PC. I don't recommend you guys try using that line because you'll get kicked out of the bedroom. All right, so first I'll break down the components, then talk about the accessories that I think are really helpful, not only when you build a PC, but specifically for small form factor PCs. And then just for full disclosure, guys, I actually built this PC once already, but the motherboard was messed up and I had so many technical issues, like my camera stopped recording after 30 minutes. By the way, this is really hard to do. And if you guys have seen other guides, please give them a thumbs up as well. Please give them a thumbs up. Please give this video a thumbs up too, because it's not easy to do. It's really, really painful to do. I would much rather just build it and then show you guys what I built. But I thought this would be kind of fun, a little bit different than what I've been doing. So yeah, let's get into the components. This here is the case that I'm using. This is the Corsair NR200, and this is a great case for so many reasons. One, if you're new into the small form factor PC building world, this is a great beginner's case because it's still roomy enough to do what you need to do. You don't need to do a ton of cable management because again, it's got so much room inside it that airflow is gonna be fine. And that's actually gonna bring your cost down, which I'll get to in a little bit as well. And yeah, it's just an excellent case. It's really easy to access. You don't need tools to access most of what's inside here. And because of that, it's gonna make upgrading, swapping out components super duper easy. I highly recommend this case after already building it once. Again, it has been a joy to build in. So yeah, excellent case. Plus it looks gorgeous. The CPU that I'm using is the Ryzen 9 5950X. I lucked out. If you guys are trying to figure out like how do you get a 5950X, I got really lucky. If you guys follow any of these like drop websites or like stock tracker websites, if AMD ever drops a CPU and it's not the 5950X, go to AMD's website and go to the main page where it shows you all the different processor products. And there's a chance that the 5950 will be available because AMD's website is like messed up. And when it shows stock for one item, sometimes other items aren't stock, but the stock trackers don't always pick that up. So I think when the 5800X dropped, I just went to the AMD's website and looked at the main page and the 5950X was in stock and I didn't have any competition. I checked out, it was super smooth. So yeah, that's just a pro tip if you're looking to pick up a 5950X at retail price. The motherboard that I'm getting paired with it is here. This is the Asus X570i Strix. This is an ITX motherboard. This case can take, I believe, I think it's ITX, but the reason why I chose the X570 Strix over the 550 Strix is because the 570 has a little bit better VRMs, which is, I'm not planning on overclocking this, but it's always the just in case, right? Like in case I want to overclock, in case I want to tune it a little bit more. And also because it's got PCIe Gen 4 for the solid states. Now, I don't have a Gen 4 because I just think it's outlandishly expensive for what you're getting. I'd prefer to have more space than it's not little, it's actually significantly faster, but I don't need all that speed. I don't think so anyway. When the prices come down though, I'd like to pick one up and that's why I decide to future-proof just a little bit by getting the X570. For those who pick up a small form factor case with a USB-C 3.2 in the front, you want to get the B550 Strix if you're into the Asus world, because the B550 has a front USB-C port, the X570 does not. And this is the other thing I forgot to mention is price-wise, this is a moderately priced motherboard, an ITX motherboard. Again, assuming that you don't pick it up at the crazy, scalped prices, right? It's a very, I think, good priced ITX motherboard for what it has to offer. And you can get the highest one is gonna be the Asus Crosshair 8, which is like $430. And it's a fantastic motherboard, but it's really expensive. Just keep in mind also that the Crosshair 8 is a DTX, which I haven't really heard of. The DTX is a slightly bigger ITX motherboard. Now this case can fit it with some limitations, but you want to make sure that compatibility wise you can fit it if you decide to go with the highest end ITX motherboard. For those of you guys who don't know, ITX is the small form factor motherboard. Then you've got DTX, which I don't know if everybody does it, but Asus does it. Then you've got the M-ATX, which is a micro ATX motherboard. It's not as common these days. Then you've got the ATX, which is your standard full-size motherboard. And then you've got EATX, which is your big kahuna, which not a lot of people use as well. So it's not as common. So that's the motherboard and why I chose it. You know, the 5950 fastest, again, fastest PC, the X570i at a moderate / budget price, right? So okay, going now to my graphics card. So, okay, this is the 3090. This is the Strix 3090. I was lucky to pick this up before stock got super bad about like, what, 6 months ago or something. And I mean, it was always bad, but it was a lot less bad back then. And this is the one I have in my dream PC right now. I was actually able to pick up a 3070 white Strix that I'm going to be putting inside of my dream PC. And I figured it'd be kind of fun to have the 3090 in here, especially because this is going to be my main editing rig as well. So I pulled the 3090 Strix out of there. And if you want some tips on how to get a graphics card now, honestly guys, Newegg shuffle, right? I don't know how, but I have one single email and I've been able, I don't know why, but I was able to pick up a 3070 for a friend and I was able to pick up the white 3070 Strix. Like I was like shocked. My heart was beating so fast when I was able to pick that up. So yeah, that is the 3090 Strix coming from my old PC. The power supply, because right now you're thinking like, oh my God, that's a lot. That's like really powerful components. How are you gonna power that in a small form factor case? Well, Cooler Master came out with their V850 SFX. Be very careful because there is a V850 non-SFX and then there's the V850 SFX. Make sure you pick up the right one. SFX means a small form factor power supply. Now, this, I think, is one of the fastest SFX power supplies you can pick up in the market right now. It has some drawbacks, at least from reviews. I haven't been able to test it because, again, my PC didn't boot, but I've heard that the fan curve gets pretty ridiculously loud really quickly. I'll let you guys know in a follow-up video whether or not that's true, but yeah, I had to get something more powerful to be able to power the 3090 and the 5950X. There is a 1000 watt Silverstone SFX L power supply that exists that can fit in this case, but I wasn't sure. I didn't want to pick it up because I was worried about the fit with the 3090 because you do have to reconfigure the way the power supply fits in this case if you do that. So yeah, I wanted something powerful to do that. Yeah, it's not bad to build with, right? The Corsair SF750 is kind of the golden staple thing, but when I picked this power supply up, it was actually cheaper than the Corsair SF750 because at that time, nobody had anything in stock and it was $250. But if you don't need all this power, I recommend the SF750. It's a joy to use. It doesn't have a lot of issues whatsoever. Yeah, but I picked up the 850 for power reasons. And because it was cheaper than the SF70, at least right now. The cooler. So this is the Scythe Fuma 2. And the reason why I'm using this is because, well, Scythe actually, when I hide my, this is the Fuma 2. So Scythe reached out and they were like, hey, we saw your PC build video. We'd love to hook you up with some stuff. You know, can we send some stuff over? So huge props to Scythe for sending the Fuma 2 out. I'm really excited to see what this is like. And the Fuma 2 is a budget cooler, but I've heard many reviews saying it is outstanding. Like the price to performance ratio is outstanding. Now, am I nervous whether or not this is gonna be able to cool the 5950X? Just a little bit, but again, I'll do a follow-up video showing you what the performance is like and any other notes that I need to make or any other corrections. If I get anything wrong here, guys, feel free to hammer me in the comments and I'll try to address those in the follow-up video. All right, so, the RAM that I'm using is in this bag. Again, this is what I mean by all my components are everywhere. This is the G.Skill Ripjaws 3600 with the 18 CAS latency. There is a 16 CAS latency, but I chose this. This is 64 gigabytes, by the way, 2 sticks, 32 each. If you're not familiar with ITX motherboards, I think all ITX motherboards only have 2 RAM slots, so keep that in mind. If you try to get a 4-pack, you're only gonna be able to fit 2 of them in there. So obviously, right? So yeah, this is the 3600 megahertz with the 18 CAS. Now they make a 16 CAS, which has tighter timings, which gets you a little bit better performance, but I didn't think it was worth the $100 premium over the 18 CAS. At least I don't think so. So yeah, if I'm wrong about that, let me know in the comments. But again, this is the fastest PC at the budget price point, or at least trying to be more price mindful here, price conscious. The solid state drive that I'm using here is the Inland Premium NVMe solid state drive, not the Platinum. The reason why I picked up this NVMe solid state drive is because this is a 2 terabyte NVMe drive, and I'm tired of getting these 1 terabyte drives where I install like 3 games and then I'm out of space. So I wanted a little bit bigger of a solid state drive, but I didn't want to break the bank. If you get a Gen 4, it's gonna be like 1.5 times the cost, like $400 for 2 terabytes. And I was like, that's too much. This is on Linus Tech Tips forums. This was rated as an A tier. This is a Gen 3 solid state drive, and it was priced at about $200. And that's perfect because a lot of solid state drives, just even regular M.2 drives and even SATA drives, are $100 for a terabyte. So I was like, this is a no-brainer. I gotta pick this up. I want additional space. This is a great buy. Dan from the future here. I forgot to add that using an M.2 or an M.2 NVMe drive is going to significantly cut down on the amount of cables you're gonna need, and on a small form factor PC, that's gonna mean the world. If you go with a traditional M-SATA or a traditional spinning hard drive, you're gonna need an additional 2 cables. One from the power supply to power the drive, and then one that connects the drive to the actual PC. And the biggest problem is in that the power supply cable that powers that drive, it's not a single connector, it's a bundle connector. So there's a few connectors on it, and it's really hard to wrap that thing and shove it somewhere so you can close the case. So yeah, if you can get an M.2 or an M.2 NVMe, you might pay a little bit of a premium, but it's gonna save you a ton of headache in a small form factor. And again, my recommendation is go big, because games are big, these files are huge these days, and you don't wanna have octopus tentacles coming off of your PC just to get more storage because you didn't go big the first time. So yeah, this is the Inland Premium NVMe drive, and I think that kind of does it for the components. Yeah, I've got some fans over there. The fans also sent over to me by Scythe. So I've got the Scythe Shuriken fan, and so I can only fit one of them in with the 3090 here. Going into the little accessories, let me go ahead and move this off a little bit, and then we'll do that. Breaking down some of the accessories that you're gonna need, starting from the absolutely 1000% you need it or you can't build your PC, going down to the preferred specifically for the small form factor world. Okay, so the first thing you 1000% need is gonna be some kind of thermal grease. Now, a lot of times your CPU cooler will come with the thermal grease, but in the event that it doesn't, or in a small form factor PC, you're gonna want one that performs a bit better, because thermals is always going to be some sort of an issue on a small form factor PC. And I got this one called the Cryonaut Extreme by Thermal Grizzly. Thermal Grizzly makes some really good stuff. Their Cryonaut line is really good. This is my first time using the Extreme, the Cryonaut Extreme. And be careful, guys, because this stuff is super duper sticky, because when I put my cooler onto the CPU, when I actually went to remove the cooler, it ripped out my processor from a locked state. It was the most terrifying heart attack moment ever when building a PC, especially considering how expensive and how rare the processor is. But yeah, all is well. This is the thermal grease. Okay, the other thing you 1000% need is going to be a screwdriver. And I highly recommend that you get a quality screwdriver slash screwdriver set for all your needs, PC needs, little electronic needs, because yeah, I have used cheap ones from Amazon, and let me tell you, they have shaved so many screws, and actually the bits themselves have gotten shaved from when I'm undoing like laptop screws. It's really bad. The iFixit line, you know, all these big YouTubers are like, oh, iFixit. I was like, these guys are all paid. It's not, maybe they are, but man, iFixit really makes some high quality stuff. And the biggest advantage of having an iFixit screwdriver is the ability to, it's got a magnetic tip, and that is going to make all the difference when building a PC, and all the more difference when building a small form factor PC, because I guarantee you, if you don't get a magnetic tip screwdriver, you're going to go nuts, because if you drop a screw, especially when doing your motherboard, that thing could be gone, and it could be a whole process of lifting your motherboard up just to get that single screw out. So yeah, I highly recommend getting a quality screwdriver set. iFixit makes some really good stuff, and it's got the magnetic tips here. Dan from the future again. I forgot to add that an accessory you're gonna need 1000% regardless of which PC you're building is a thumb drive with your operating system of choice. In this case, it's gonna be Windows 10. And if you don't know how to do this, it's really easy to just Google or YouTube on how to do this. And right now, you don't need a Windows 10 activation key. You can just get Windows 10 and you can skip the activation part, and you're just gonna have an annoying watermark, and you won't be able to personalize certain settings, but you're gonna be able to use Windows 10 just fine, and you can get an activation code and activate later down the line. Now, everything else here is going to be stuff that's preferred, but not 100% necessary. So starting from like general PC building, and then I'll get to specific small form factor PC building. So this is going to be, what are these called? Zip ties. You want zip ties because you want to be able to cable manage. Now, it's not always necessary to cable manage, but it always looks better when you do it, especially if it's visible to the outside, if you can see through, if you get like a glass case. It's also in a small form factor PC, being able to tidy up your cables is going to help with airflow, and you're going to need the airflow. Not so much in the NR200, as you guys will see, but yeah, you're going to want some zip ties. That's going to be helpful. The next thing you're gonna want when building a PC in general is gonna be some kind of light. Like, yeah, you can use your phone's flashlight, and it's not that great. If you can get a little light bulb, a little lamp or something, a dedicated shop light or something that can just shine into your components, it's gonna make your life a lot easier. In my case, I've got this aperture light. Now, I don't recommend you pick this up for PC building. I have this because of my YouTube stuff. But yeah, it's magnetic, so I'm able to just kind of stick it on there, and even on the inside too, to really kind of give me additional light, and I can control the power as well. So this is a really convenient thing to have, just an additional source of light, because again, it gets hard to see. Like, you might think you have plenty of lighting, but you're in a cavernous area with the PC case. You really want some strong light to get in there so you can see and read the stuff on the motherboard. All right. Now, this. You're gonna want, this is isopropyl alcohol. You're gonna want alcohol, and you're gonna want some Q-tips too. The reason why you're gonna want this is because if it's your first time building a PC, or you're using components that you're not familiar with, like I did, there's a good chance that you might seat your cooler incorrectly. And to get that thermal paste off, you're gonna need alcohol and some Q-tips. Now, I recommend this as opposed to some of the specific products that are made for this, because this will be just as effective, and the benefit of this is you probably already have this at home. You just want to have it on hand so you don't have to go chase it down later. So that's the alcohol and the Q-tips. Now, specifically for small form factor, I think there are two things that are really helpful that I don't really see in a lot of videos, and one of them is going to be a fan splitter. The reason why you want a 4-pin, a PWM fan splitter. And the reason why you want a PWM fan splitter is because a lot of times on the small form factor, the ITX motherboards, you don't get a ton of fan headers, or you get a good amount of fan headers, but like one is like all the way in the bottom where your fan is on the top, and you run out of top fan headers. So that can be really frustrating. And if you're working in a small space, it's easier to just kind of stick one of these into a fan header and have it split down to however many fans you're gonna use. And the other convenient part about that is when it goes to tuning your PC, like the fan curves, you're able to basically stick that in there and set one profile, and all the fans that are linked to it will operate at that same speed. And yeah, like if you have 2 fans up top, then you want to split it to 2 fans, and that way those 2 fans will spin at the same speed. So this is a nice to have, and you might need it. The good thing is these are cheap, and if you don't need it, just keep it in its packaging and you can return it pretty easily. And this is something that I learned when I was building in my first small form factor PC. It was much smaller. It was the Fractal Node 200, I think. It's like a little tiny thin PC case. This is a USB 3.0 extension. And the reason why I recommend this is because your USB 3.0 that comes on your case, this is the front USB ports on your case. Every case that I've used, the way it connects to your motherboard is with this gigantic head. And sometimes in a small form factor PC, it can be extremely difficult to wiggle that and fit that inside of your motherboard, to the point where I've had a lot of USB ports break on me because I've damaged that cable. So this is an extension cable, and the reason why I picked it is because, I don't know if you guys can see this, let me do it here, hopefully you can pick it up. Like, look how much thinner this head is. This is where it actually connects to your motherboard, and it's able to bend a lot easier compared to what comes standard in a PC case. Let me see if I can actually pull this open for you guys so you guys can see what I'm talking about. This is the cable that comes with every single front port USB connector. Look how chunky that is. Compare it to this. Look how much thinner, smaller, more flexible it is to work with. And yeah, so what's gonna happen is you're gonna extend it through here, and then you can connect it to your small form factor motherboard. And the benefit of this case is it's not bad at all, right? I don't know where I'm looking. It's not bad at all, and you don't need this, but again, if you're working with a smaller PC, you might wanna pick this up and have it on hold just in case. You can't find this at Micro Center and local stores, I don't think. So you're gonna have to pick this up on Amazon. Another accessory you might wanna consider for a small form factor build are custom length power supply cables. In this case, I didn't use any, but I did order one custom cable from P-Slate. Now, P-Slate is a manufacturer that does a lot of custom length cables for various power supplies and specific cases. And the reason you might wanna do this is because cable management in small form factor PCs is not only difficult, but it can also impact the amount of airflow in your case. Now, each power supply is also a little bit different in the cables they provide. For example, in the Cooler Master cables, those cables are very short. And what that's gonna mean is there's gonna be no ability to cable manage because it's already gonna be super taut by the time you reach your destination. And on something like the Corsair SF750, the cables are gonna be extra long, which means you might not have a ton of room to shove your cables into, and that might even restrict some airflow. So again, you might wanna consider getting some custom cables. It's gonna cost you an arm and a leg, but that's kind of the premium you pay for going small form factor. All right, that's it for the components. Let's get building. I'm gonna be building a little off to the side because my overhead camera is a little bit here on my left, and I wanna make sure you guys have a good angle. The first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna wanna take your motherboard and you're gonna wanna install as many components on here as possible. So when it comes to the NVMe drive, like I said, these connect directly onto the motherboard. So you can read your manual to figure out exactly where those slots are. In general, if you've got a budget motherboard, a more budget motherboard, you'll generally find, what's going on here? Come on, okay. You'll generally find an M.2 slot without a shield on it like this, and it'll just be like a little mouth like this here. So yeah, and if you do have one of these shield things, make sure there's always gonna be like a thermal pad here. Make sure you peel that plastic off on the pad. Make sure you're not putting plastic on top of your drive, because your drive can get pretty super duper hot. Let me just throw it down to the side there. Okay, so, and then there's usually a screw. Some motherboards actually have the M.2 NVMe drive screws as part of its little pouch of accessories inside the box. So yeah, don't just go tossing bags with screws in it away. You might need it, and it might be a pain to go chase it down later. So you wanna find the little tip here, and you wanna align it to the tip that's in the connector on your motherboard. And you wanna go ahead and put it on top, not on the bottom. Stick it in at an angle like this, then gently push it down. In my case, the screw is already installed, but again, sometimes on motherboards, these little screws come as part of the accessory kit in your motherboard. So you wanna have that there, and then you wanna screw that down. That way it doesn't go flopping everywhere. And then, again, make sure that little shrink wrap is taken off if you have a thermal pad, and then put that back on. In this motherboard's case, there are these little pins here that you need to make sure you align as well, and it's in. Oh, hello. There is some shrink wrap on this heatsink, but I am not going to peel it off right now because I know I'm gonna get it all fingerprinted up later. So I try to do shrink wrap a little bit later, and I know nothing is gonna really get in the way. So generally when you screw things down, you wanna be able to do it where you have even pressure. I totally failed on that this time, but especially with these kind of components where, you know, even pressure is gonna be really critical, and you're working with slightly like thin components, and even with woodwork and stuff, you generally wanna screw things in balanced. You don't wanna go like 1000% in here, and then while like the whole board is shifted, then you go 1000%. You wanna do like 10%, 10%, 10%. You wanna make sure that's even. So that's the solid state drive. Next, I'm gonna grab my RAM. So I don't advise you guys to store your components like this, by the way. because there's a chance that the metal can get scratched up by all those little screws in there. So your RAM, in order to install your RAM, you want to make sure that the 2 clips here are pulled back like that and not in the locked position. This is locked, pulled back is the unlocked. Now you want to find that little divot in your RAM and you want to make sure that it aligns with the connector divot here. This is a place where you can really damage your components if it's not in correctly, okay? And the reason why I'm putting all this stuff in place first before the CPU is because it's not really gonna get in the way. And that way, if you're using some kind of more conductive thermal paste, you're not gonna get it on any of the any of these open holes. So yeah, I don't know, it's personal preference. I know a lot of people do the CPU first, it's your call. So yeah, you wanna make sure that those holes line up. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna slot into the hole evenly here. And then once it's kind of like sitting on top, you're gonna wanna rock it. So one side down first, like that, you'll hear a little click. And then the second click here when you go to the other side, and you'll see this tab move up. Here you go, let me stop talking. You hear that click, and now it's in. Now, when you do your second RAM, it's really easy. Look for where all the information is on your RAM and make sure it's facing the same way as the first RAM. So in this case, it's facing left, or my left, so I know that this RAM is gonna slot in the exact same way. And again, this is one of those areas where if you're doing it upside down, you can damage the RAM or your motherboard, so take great care to do that. Okay, arguably the scariest part of a PC build is gonna be installing the processor. And it's warranted because the processor is, yeah, it's very dainty. And if you're not careful, you can destroy your CPU or, yeah. You can't really damage your motherboard by doing it. Well, I guess you could, but yeah, more so your CPU. So when you open your CPU, be very careful because there are pins at the bottom here. And if any of those pins get bent, you're gonna be in a world of hurt, okay? So you wanna be very careful about handling this. Make sure that you're grabbing it on the sides and make sure you've got a firm grip on it, okay? No chances here, guys. All right. And what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna take on every CPU, including Intel as well, if you're building on Intel, you're gonna see a little golden arrow. And on your motherboard, there should be some kind of indicator of where that arrow should go. In this case, I don't know if you guys can see it here, but it's right down here. There is an arrow pointing this way, and here there's an arrow pointing that way. Now you wanna unlatch your CPU stick here, just like that. On an Intel, it's gonna look very different. On an Intel, there's gonna be like a black shield looking thing here, and you're gonna unlock it and that shield's gonna come up with you. When you put your CPU and then you lock it, that black part is gonna pop off. For the AMDs, there's no shielding here. It's just a little thing like this. And you're gonna wanna very carefully make sure that it's all lined up and don't push it down. Just let it drop gentle. I'm moving it around just slightly until right there, it just dropped down into the pins. And you're gonna know you did it. Again, move it, slide it very gently around. And if you're too scared to slide it, then pick it up and drop and just gently place it down multiple times. I find it's a little easy if you slide around just a little bit. And with an AMD, it's super easy. You're just gonna bend this pin back down and lock it under just like it was at the beginning. With an Intel CPU, guys, I did a build, or my friend did a build recently, and it's a lot scarier than AMD's. Like the amount of pressure you need to use to lock down that CPU and the squeaking noise that comes with it is terrifying. But as long as you know that the CPU is seated properly, you don't need to worry about it. But yeah, for the Intel motherboards especially, it can be CPUs, it can be very, very terrifying. Just go slow, okay? So for AMD, you're gonna need to remove these 2 shields here, these 2 plastic shields. With Intel, I don't think it's the case. I don't think you need to. I can't remember off the top of my head. My friend used a air cooler, so he didn't need to. Instead, he just needed to add on some clips. And so with AMD, you wanna remove those. And again, that's principle of equal pressure, right? You don't wanna, and then you can toss this aside. Uh-oh. See that magnetic power there? So you can toss this aside. And also, if you can, get yourself a standing desk when you build and clear the whole thing off, because one, you're gonna need more space than you think you'll need, and two, a standing desk is really, really useful when it comes to building a PC, because you're gonna need that desk at different heights. Like right now, this is way too high for me, but for the sake of the tutorial, I've got it here. But right now, I would want it a little bit lower, and then later when I'm building inside of the case, I would want to raise it higher. So it's really nice to have, if you're able to have a standing desk to be able to change up the heights. All right, so you're gonna remove these parts, and I'm not gonna go into it, but read your manual about, with your PC cooler, it's gonna come with like a whole bunch of components. It's a really confusing portion. Take the time to read about what you're gonna need for your specific motherboard, for your specific processor, for your specific version of the processor. So for AMD, for the Ryzen 9 series, you're gonna need these 4 black riser things, and you're gonna wanna set them right over each of these black screws here. So put it down here, put it down here, put it down here, and put it down here. And in this case, you want it with that rubber pad facing up. And then you're gonna go ahead and install this, and I can't remember if it's this way or that way. I have to go consult the manual. I'll be right back. Okay, so if you guys can see this manual, this is what I'm talking about. It's like overwhelming and it's very confusing. There's a lot going on here. Generally, you wanna look for the words of Intel and AMD, and then when you find your section, you wanna look at the Intel, and then you wanna look at like which chipset version it's using. So here it's LGA 2066/2011. So look up your specific processor and see which one it's on, right? In my case, it tells me AMD, you're gonna need these long screws and those 4 stands, the standoffs that I was talking about. And this is Intel here, so I'm gonna go find the AMD portion. Here's AMD. Thankfully, AMD only has one thing, right? Versus Intel has like this side and that side are 2 different chipsets here. I'm gonna find the Intel, so it tells me to take out those black pieces, put on the standoffs, and then when I install these, it looks like I have to install them with the metal face, this little bump facing up, and with these ridges facing the outside of facing the outsides. So essentially bump side up, and the ridges facing the outside of the case. So in this case, I'm gonna put it here, just like that. And this one is gonna be facing outside again, just like that. I'll get my 4 long screws. 2, 3, and 4. And you're gonna wanna line those holes up. And I'm just gonna get it started so that it can get seated. The second one. This is what I mean. Oh, well, should have been magnetic. This is what I mean by it's helpful to have magnetic, because then you can slowly guide it down. And go ahead and drop it in just like that. Okay, when you start having some pressure, that's when you want to even that pressure out, not go too far all at once. Okay. Same thing here. Here, and there, and there, and there. Okay, now with this case, there is something that I need to do over here first before I put the cooler on. This is specific. So every small form factor case will have its own quirks, and every motherboard will have its own quirks. The AMD's, this motherboard is by far the quirkiest one I've ever used. There's like a fan built in. I haven't seen that kind of stuff in motherboards before, so it is by far the quirkiest one that I'm dealing with. And the biggest quirk here, which I had to find out after I installed the cooler, which is why I had to take off the cooler and found out that the the Cryonaut Extreme is extremely sticky, is that you have this under this shield, under this part of the motherboard. That's where the HD audio. That's where the audio port is found. So yeah, I only know this because I made the mistake already. So if you plan on building this motherboard, you are welcome. Just take smaller screws. So here. So you're going to unscrew this little piece right here, and this pops up. And you can see right here, this is where the HD audio goes. Now they give you, the motherboard gives you this like adapter. And so you're going to want to use this. And when it comes to connecting any cables to the headers on your motherboard, you can look at like, oh, like this is the plus, this is the minus. You can do that, or you can just look for where the hole is, like where the blocked off pin is. In this case, the blocked off pin is down here. Over here, the blocked off pin, or I was missing a pin on the top, so this is obviously backwards. So I'm gonna go ahead and change up the direction, and I'm gonna go ahead and slot it in here, just like that. Make sure it's down firm. And then I'm gonna wanna have it just like that so that when I put the cooler on, like I can't access this port if the CPU cooler's on. So that's why I knew that I had to do that right now versus having to do it again at a later time. So, and this is what I mean. These screws are tiny. Imagine if you lose one of these, you're gonna pull your hair out trying to find it. It's better to get a quality screwdriver set to avoid that. This is weird. Why is it not flat? There it goes. This is a weird, quirky design. Okay, so that's in place. And I'll bend it out of the way for the cooler. So now it's time for the CPU cooler. All right, this is where you want to do the thermal paste, and this is where it always gets controversial about how much paste you need. And every cooler is going to be a little bit different, and you know, because the AMD CPUs are going to be a lot bigger than the Intel dies, right? Like look how big that is. The Intels are probably like, it's a smaller square than that. And when it comes to the Fuma 2, I haven't used air coolers in a very long time. I've used AIOs, all-in-one coolers, liquid coolers for a long time. And I actually thought, you see how there's like this divot here on the fins? I actually thought that this was supposed to go on this side so that it can give you clearance of the RAM. Like, I thought that was logical, right? Like, oh yeah, you're gonna need that so it cools the RAM, right? It's not the case. The reason why it's here is because every motherboard has an input-output section. So the left side is gonna be elevated. And that elevation, if you have a big cooler, it's gonna need to be able to clear that. So in this case, that elevation is actually meant for to go over the I/O, not the other side. So I was wondering like why it didn't, the CPU cooler didn't line up with the CPU die. It's because I was doing it backwards. So hopefully I'll get it right this time. All right, so starting with the thermal paste. A lot of times the Thermal Grizzly will come with different heads. In my case, I'm not really gonna use a different head. I'm just gonna go ahead and squirt it. And with the AMD CPUs, I generally like to do an X. Yeah, there are different methods. You can do like the drop of P, but I find because it's a little bit bigger, I want to have a little bit more spread. I can't see anything. Oh boy, there's a lot of paste on the upper side. Okay, you want to make sure all the paste is off so it doesn't drop on any components, because that's going to be a headache to clean up, and that should be good. I know it's not the prettiest job. Feel free to flame me in the comments. Now, some people like to scrape it on. I should figure out how to use this extreme. There might be different instruction sets for it, but there was no, oh, there was a paper. Oh, it says optional. Okay, yeah, it says optional. So it comes with these little spatula things, those little flat pieces that you can like scrape on. In my case, I'm not really gonna do that. I think I've got plenty of paste on there. And by the way, if you guys are like, oh, you use too much, you use too little, or you use too much, there's a very thorough test out there on the internet showing that too much thermal paste isn't bad. The only time it can be bad, and in this case I think it can be bad, is if your paste is conductive. Then if that's the case, you could be in big trouble. Because if that gets on any component, any electrical component, it can short your motherboard, so be very careful. Most thermal paste, you shouldn't have an issue with that, okay? So This is gonna seat right on top of the cooler, and it should come with, air cooler should come with a long screwdriver like this, because you're gonna be able to need to reach the screws that are down here, and a regular screwdriver can't reach that. So here, I'm gonna wanna make sure it's seated properly over the screws. It's a little harder because I'm not directly over it like I wanna be for the sake of this video. So I'm gonna do my best to get it lined up. Okay, so it's right on this side. All right. So this especially is where you want to be, you want to go even on the amount of pressure you put on when it comes to screwing your motherboard in. What's nice is, and I don't know if all CPU coolers come with this, but it's got this like specific type of screw that's supposed to prevent you from over tightening. But generally you don't want to go too tight. You're not trying to break your CPU, you just want really solid, even pressure contact across your CPU, and you want that thermal paste to be as much as possible evenly spread throughout the CPU as well, giving even, giving even pressure, giving even coverage of that for best cooling. All right, so most of it's on. Now I'm going to go ahead and install these fans. One thing that you want to note, so in my case with the Fuma 2, you actually get one full-sized fan that drops into the middle here. And then you get a thin one on the outside, and I think you get a thin one because if you had a fat one, it might not cover the RAM. So here is when you want to do a little bit of planning. You're going to want to look for the fan header that says CPU fan, because a lot of these motherboards, and I don't know why I didn't realize this, a lot of these motherboards have a dedicated CPU fan slot. And the reason why it's there is because a lot of these motherboards, when you start up your PC, like when you first turn it on, it's gonna be looking for that CPU, because if it doesn't have a cooler, then your computer is gonna get insanely hot and it's gonna maybe get damaged. Now, nowadays they have auto shut off if it gets too hot, but they have a specific CPU fan slot so that it's looking for it. When you turn your PC on, it'll tell you, hey, there's no CPU fan detected. You can override that setting in the BIOS, but it's there as a protective measure. If you don't really know what you're doing, you don't really know how to fudge with the BIOS, then you want to make sure that you get that slot right, okay? So in my case, the CPU fan is up here on the left side, the far left, and I'm going to take my splitter here. And because I know it's up there, I'm going to want my cables to go on that side. So I'm going to want my cables going this way as opposed to any other way, all right? I could, if I wanted, actually to put it, I could actually put it maybe like this way. And what I could do for cable management is have all my fan cables go under and route through here for better cable management. So I could do that. As a matter of fact, I think I will do that. So yeah, and the last thing to consider before you put these fans on is, no, I think that's it. Okay. Oh, there is one more thing. One thing to consider is how your fan, the fan direction is blowing. So in my case, I know that this is the back of the case and I want the air to travel from front to back. 90% of the time, that's what you're gonna want, unless you have a CPU cooler that mounts in front, like on top like this, then you're gonna want the cool air to be sucking from the outside and blowing into the CPU, obviously, because you want to cool the PC, you want to cool that. So in my case, I want to be blowing the air out this way. So on your fans on this outside here, you should see arrows that point to which way the airflow is working. In this case, there is no such arrow. What's going on? Oh, here it is. It's telling you that, look, this way, if you have it this way, the fans are spinning this way, and air is blowing out that way. So it's sucking in here and blowing out that way. And this is exactly the way I want to mount it. So I'm going to go ahead and route my fan cable under here, because this I can cable manage just a little bit in advance. By taking that through here. And I'm gonna go ahead and make sure, double check to make sure the orientation is correct. All right, yeah, in my case, I actually did it the wrong way, so it should be this way. And just like that. Let's try that one more time. Get under, fan goes in, top, down, oh, okay. All right, it doesn't want to play ball with me. Let's install the fan first. So the CPU fans are kind of a pain in the butt to mount. So the way you do it on this one, and I've already done it here, is, and I'll remove it for your guys' sake, just to show you. And this is the case with Noctua and all the different air cooling fans. So there's this little plastic piece that looks like this. And the way it clips on is you want to have it clip on from the outside, and you want to have this thing hanging on the far left part. So you want to put that through the 2 holes in your fan. Just like, oh wait, no, I don't. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Okay, yeah, so you want to have it. So basically, this part should be facing upwards. And you're gonna go ahead and just angle this down. I've had to fudge with this a couple times because I did make some mistakes. It's not that hard to get off. You might prick your finger because the edges are sharp here. But like I said, you are already ready for some, yeah, look at that. I just did it wrong. You see how this one is down here and I just put this one this way? So yeah, if that happens to you, you wanna push down right here on this edge. I'm gonna push it down with your nail, your finger, and you wanna bend it and pop it out. Just like that, and just like that. And this is all in your manual. Again, go slow. You won't make these stupid mistakes for the second time like I will, okay? And there you are. And this is what it should look like. So, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna drop it in, and you're gonna get some rubbing on here on the side fins. And once you get it to the height that you like, you're gonna pull these fans inwards like this until it snaps onto some fan ridges here. It's not just like that. I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me tip it over, right? So you slide it down until you get to the position that you like. Then you pull this in, and there's a little slot here down the side of the, what is this? The metal grate here. So you're gonna pull it until it reaches that and snaps right in just like that. It's nice when you understand it. It's a pain in the ass if you don't know what the heck it's doing. So there's that. Let me go ahead and route the fan cable first before I put the second fan on. That way I'm not having to maneuver through a second fan later on. And this is my fan splitter that I was talking about earlier. Sometimes the CPU fans come with it if you have multiple fans, sometimes. So here's that, and I'm gonna just leave that right there. And I'm gonna get the second one here. And just as a pro tip, wherever this logos are, like you're gonna have 2 logos, you're usually gonna have the brand and then all the fan information on the back. If this fan, like all the fans, if the brand is facing one way, then all of them, as long as you find the way the brand is facing, you can face all of them that way and you'll be getting the airflow the same way. In my case, I forgot which side it's on, so I'm gonna need to, and the other way you can do it, the easier way you can do it is you see how the fans are leaning towards the left? So in this case, the fans are gonna spin this way and you can feel where does the air go? And in this case, the air is going down towards my hand, so it's gonna pin up this way, okay? So in the same way, I'm gonna go ahead and route the cable under just like that to meet me on the other side. I'm gonna find the right fan heights. I don't want it to push up against my RAM too hard because they're pretty close. So I'm gonna have it just come up just a little bit so it's not pushing onto my RAM. See how it's sticking out a little bit, but I'm okay with that as long as it's not. Oh, actually I can go lower. There we go. Okay, all good. There and maybe one down. Oh, this one popped out. That's why. That's why it's being so weird. Right there and on the side. Right there. Okay. Uh-oh, I missed it. It's okay. Then I can finagle it down here just a little bit. All right. All right. So now I can go ahead and attach it to the second extension over here. Just like that. And then find the CPU fan header, and I'm gonna just drop it in just like this. For your CPU fan header, you can generally read CPU. Uh-oh. All right, you gotta be really careful here. Oh wait, did I do it right? You can read, there's like tiny font. I don't think you're gonna be able to see it in the camera, but there's tiny font written on your motherboard to tell you which one's which. And if you don't have that, your motherboards come with a manual. If you're using a budget motherboard, I found out about this because I haven't really used like super budget motherboards. Their manuals are terrible. They don't give you a lot of information. On mid to higher tier motherboards, they come with really detailed manuals and they show you all the different components. Like here, they'll show you like what's what. And up here, you'll see on line 4, okay, I don't know if you guys can see that, it'll detail out like that's the CPU fan, this is the pump if you have one for your all-in-one cooler, this is a fan header here, and it'll show you all of that stuff in detail. So you wanna have your manual close by, especially if you're not very familiar with building PCs. This stuff is gold, and Asus always provides pretty good manuals with their boards. Okay, so basically, my motherboard is all done and it's ready to slot into the computer at this point, okay? Or into the case at this point. So, let me go ahead and move all this stuff over. The PC case. In my case, the NR200 is nice because again, it's toolless. So you can pop everything open without tools. Let me start actually with the top here and then I'm gonna work my way down. Let's start with the front then. There we go. So that's the front. This is the side. Oh, okay. Someone's being difficult. There's the top. Here's the side. And a lot of these cases have like a mesh, and this is to capture dust. So you can leave it on. If you take it off, you get better airflow, but you might get more dust in your PC down the line. And then you've got the other side. And this is what I mean by it's really nice. Like you could imagine fixing your PC, fixing stuff inside your PC will not be a headache with this case. I've already kind of removed some of the stuff because again, I already built my PC before. So this is where the power supply goes, and then the bottom you can pop out just as well without tools. Now what's funny about my case is that the legs are actually not on properly. And because of that, they are a little bit uneven, but it's okay. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out a solution a little later. And this is what it looks like. Now, to build in this case, you're gonna have to remove this side panel. This side panel here is so that you can mount fans there, you can mount the all-in-one cooler there. In my case, my graphics card is too big, so I cannot have this in here at all. So I'm just gonna remove this and be done with it. I can install it at the end if I really want to, but I don't want to. So I'm gonna just put this away. Save all your screws just in case. Get a baggie. That's something I forgot to mention. You might want to have a couple little baggies to put all your screws in so you don't lose any of them. All right. The motherboard is such a pain in the butt to insert. Now, a lot of people, I don't know, they don't really warn you about this, but this seriously is a big pain in the butt. So the first thing you have to do is all these motherboards come with an IO shield, right? This is what the IO shield looks like. It's just a piece of plastic. And you're gonna need to slot that in. And you slot it in by coming from the inside of the case and you press it towards the outside just like that until it snaps in place. That's the easy part. The annoying part is having to slot in everything that exists on your motherboard here into there and have it all fit. This is one of the most, I find to be one of the most frustrating things about building a PC that I don't really hear a lot of people talking about. And before I do that, I'm actually gonna rip off this little shrink wrap there. Okay, and slot it in here. And there are gonna be these standoffs that you're gonna want to make sure it lines up to. So if you can get the standoffs to line up, that's gonna be a lot, make your life easier too. Okay, it's all my standoffs and that's good enough. That was pretty harmless, but again, I have had situations where it's such a pain. Okay, I got very fortunate this time. Then your motherboard is gonna have some screws that go into it. These screws will come from your case, not from your motherboard, okay? So make sure, again, your case will have like a box of accessories. Don't throw that stuff out. And this is especially where a magnetic point can be very helpful. You go ahead and put it here into the corner. And imagine if you just drop one, like look at this cave. If you drop one in there, how are you gonna get it out? You can't unless you tip the whole thing up and rock it and pray it doesn't fall into a fin, right? So this is why magnetic tip screwdrivers are super duper helpful. On an ITX case, on an ITX motherboard, it's not too bad because there's only screws in the 4 corners. But on an ATX case, they've got ones on the outside as well as I think 2 in like the middle of the board too. So yeah, it's even for an ATX motherboard, which is the full size motherboard, even then you're still gonna want something that's got a magnetic tip. Do you see how like dark it is in here? This is what I mean by having a source of light is really, really, really helpful to have. So in my case, I'm gonna go ahead and put it here so I can just see a little bit better. Oh boy, this one's gonna be a pain. This is what I mean by it is so hard to build on camera, because if I didn't have to do this, it would be so much easier. So if you guys can, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you feel so inclined to subscribe, please do. I would really appreciate it. All right, so now that the motherboard is in, now you can do the power supply. Sometimes people do the power supply first. In my case, it doesn't matter that much, but yeah, if you can do the power supply, do so, right? Because then you won't have to rock the motherboard back and forth as much. Because a lot of times the power supply sits on like the bottom here. And if it's in the bottom, then if you put the motherboard on first, then you're gonna have to like lift it up, just drop it in, and it can get really annoying. In my case, the motherboard or the power supply actually goes on the side here like that. So it's not gonna be too big of an issue. Look how tiny this is. I'm always so impressed by how small this is, and 850 watts, that's crazy, man. Seriously. I'm gonna wanna orient this in such a way that the fan is able to blow outwards. So if this drops like this, I don't want the fan facing inward, blowing air back into the case, right? Or pulling air from into the case. I want it to be this way so it can pull fresh air from outside, okay? So I'm gonna wanna go ahead and orient it this way. I don't even know if you can orient it that way. Oh, you can't, yeah. So you're good. It's dummy proof. It's Denon proof. What's nice about this case is that it uses the same screws everywhere. And that's really nice because sometimes motherboards, they use like different screws for the power supply. They use different screws for, yeah, but this one is nice because they use the same screws everywhere. Come on. There we go. I'm gonna line up those screws. I'm just gonna put one in there. Put one in the other corner. Yeah, that's why you don't see me like looking for certain screws, because in this case, it's using the same screw everywhere. There are 2 slots. There is a slot here, and then there is a slot here and here. This lower slot is supposed to be for SFX motherboards, and the upper one is meant to be for SFX power supplies, and the one on top is meant for SFX L. In my case, because I'm using a giant graphics card that's barely gonna fit in here, I'm gonna need to put it in the SFX L position to make room for that graphics card. So I'm gonna go ahead and slot it in here. Maybe I should have done the power supply first. Yeah, if you do this, don't make my mistake. Do the power supply first, guys. And I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that it sits right on top, just like that. If I can raise this cable up, and there we go. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just screw it in the back, and that's gonna be it. Okay, now the power supply is secure. So here, so on SFX PCs, there is a power cable that almost always terminates a little bit early because sometimes it doesn't have the out port. So sometimes it's got this little extra extension cable here. So you're gonna have to plug that into your power supply just like that. All right. And you're gonna wanna make sure that because this case, I mean, I can access it pretty easily, but you're gonna wanna make sure the power supply is switched. If it's got this extension, you're gonna wanna make sure the power supply is on, because if not, by the time you're finished building, you could have cables all over this thing. You might not be able to access it, or you have a case where you have to unscrew things. It's just a pain. So make sure it's kept on, and that way when you plug in your computer later, it'll just automatically be on, okay? So yeah, that's a little pro tip for you guys. All right, so that is that. I'm going to, first, before I put in my graphics card, I'm actually gonna hook everything up to my power supply. I'm not gonna plug it into my motherboard just yet. Oh, actually, there are a couple things that I need to do, but even now, I'm not gonna do it just yet. So actually, maybe I should do this now. This is another part that's frustrating. These are the front button ports of a PC. Now, Cooler Master came up with this really cool idea where they give you this plastic thing that holds all of these guys in place. The problem is that none of them are oriented in the right position. So I was like, oh, I'll just trust it, and I plugged it in, and all the switches, all the plugs were in the wrong place. I've read that you can't damage your motherboard by doing this, but you wanna be really careful. This is kind of a pain because all of these have like plus, minus, like they've got all these signs on them, and you wanna make sure you plug it into the right ports, okay? I can't really show this on camera, but yeah, consult your motherboard about what is what. I'm actually just gonna take this out because while it is convenient, it's just gonna take too much time. So this is the hardest part about small form factor PCs, is these little components when you have these fat man fingers. And okay, actually don't know how it goes. Yeah, it doesn't tell me which one's positive and negative. This is really bad. I've never seen it like that before. And so the power button, they all have a little arrow, and that indicates you're positive. On your power LEDs and the reset buttons, generally they have a plus negative. But yeah, on the power switch and the reset switch, they have an arrow. I don't know if you can see that. They have an arrow that shows you which side is positive. And again, in this case, they're not telling me which one's positive. That's really bad. All right. And the thing is, these cables are so short. What you can do is you can actually pull them back a little bit. You can peel them so they get a little bit individuality, and that's okay. You can do that. So, all right. If these are going to be facing that way, I'm going to just take I'm going to take my best guess and just say all of these are going to be facing, all the font is going to be facing that way. Hopefully this works. Okay. All right. So my front I/O cables are in, and hopefully they don't pop out. Okay. There's that. Now, like I said before, I'm gonna go ahead and take out all of my power supply. I'm gonna go ahead and connect all my power supply cables so that I just have them. I'm not gonna connect them anywhere for the sake of cable management, so I can do a little bit of cable managing later. This is a custom 8-pin cable from P-Slate, specifically for this power supply, the V850 SFX power supply. I picked this up because I know that my graphics card takes 3 8-pin cables, and the standard graphics card cables is a single 8-pin to 16-pin, and I need 24 pins. So there's 2 of these. So if I do this, then I'm gonna have, 16 pins here, and if I use the second power supply cable, then I'm gonna have 32 cables, and so I'm gonna have one of these just dangling. And I didn't want that. So I actually picked up a custom cable from P-Slate for that. These are, and I know that I'm gonna need my graphics card cable. I forget where all my cables are. I'm gonna need my CPU cable, and my CPU cable, and I'm gonna need my motherboard 24-pin cable. And that's it. And that's the beauty of not having an M-SATA. Remember I was talking earlier, if you have one of those larger rectangular solid states, is you would need an additional 2 cables, one to go from your motherboard to the hard drive, as well as one from the power supply to the hard drive to give it power. You don't want to do that. And same thing with hard disk drives as well, okay? So as much as possible, go NVMe or at the M.2 factor, okay? All right, so let's start with the largest. This is the motherboard cable. And I'll turn it upside down so you all can see exactly what I'm doing here. I'll have some light facing down this way, facing over here this way. So starting with my motherboard cable. All right. So this is done differently in that I've got one row here, and then I got 18 pins and then the 10 pin. So I'm gonna do the 18 pin on the bottom, just like that. And you wanna push until you feel like a little bit of a click. It's not loud, but it's just a little pop. And there is the other one. And this is gonna go into the side of the motherboard. Now I'm gonna do my CPU cable. So CPU cable is always 8 to 8, and you can always read CPU on the side. So the CPU cable is going to go up here. Now I'm going to put this one in the far left position because I want my 8 pins to be on the right position because my graphics card is so long. I know that that's probably gonna sit like right on top. Let me just grab my graphics card just in case, just to kind of do a rough measurement. So if it goes in like this, I don't think it'll matter, but yeah, I think it'll be okay doing the first one as CPU. And that way it's also closer to the CPU. I'll put this here for now. So put this one on the leftmost side. Drop it just like that. And then my graphics card cable. The 8 pin first one will go right here. Just like that. And the second one will go right here. Just like that. All right, you see how this one's so much shorter? It's a custom cable again from P-Slate, and they already have the measurements outlined for you. So it's nice because you don't have to measure anything manually. And P-Slate has custom cables for a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not sponsored by them. I just picked one up because I read on Reddit that a lot of people like them. So, and they're good. They are really good. They're expensive though. Okay, so yeah, all the cables that I need for this build are inside at this point. There's one more thing that I need to do, which is obviously the graphics card, but the 3090 can barely fit inside this case. Remember I talked about the fastest PC you can get with budget-ish parts. This would not be the 3090 that's in the budget range, but it's the only one I had. In order to put the 3090 in here, I have to actually undo these rails here so that I can actually kind of squeeze it in. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo those rails, and then let's go ahead and put it inside. So, okay, this is too small. Make sure you use the right size screw head because it doesn't matter how good your screwdriver is. If you're using screw heads that are too small, you're gonna damage something. Wow, that's really tight. Okay. Most graphics cards, you won't need to do what I'm doing now. This is only because this is a beast of a graphics card. I think there's another screw on that side, right? And the reason why I'm undoing both of these sides is because, ooh, that almost fell off, is because I want the case to be able to flex a little bit more so that I can drop it in before I close it off. So I'll remove this one, and I'll remove this one. I'll lower the case down this way. Move that over here. Now, for the graphics card. Okay, let me put some light on it. Right here is where the graphics card goes, right into this slot. On an SFX motherboard, you only get one of those slots. I think you only get one. I think some maybe come with like one and like a tiny one. So this is what it looks like. In order to put the graphics card in, you need to make sure that this, again, just like with the RAM, oh, this was actually locked, that this is unlocked at the out position. Then when you slot it in, it's going to click. The other thing you need to do is right over here, you would have these grates. just like you see right here, these grates. This is if you wanted to do a vertical mount of your graphics card, but obviously my cooler is so large it can't fit in there. But this has grates right here on the side. I've already removed them because I already, built in this once before, but you would unscrew the screws from up here. And then once you put the graphics cards in, you're gonna find that you're gonna screw those back in to give support to the graphics card so that it can stay in and will stay in. All right, so now with everything removed down here, now I can slot in my 3090 here, my big kahuna. And I'm gonna want to get it to go right. Actually, now that I think about it, if I go ahead and put my graphics card in right now, I'm gonna have very limited space to be able to connect all the other ports. So I'm actually gonna backtrack a little bit. I'm gonna take my graphics card out and I'm gonna actually connect all this stuff first. That way I can move it all the way and it'll all be connected and I just do my graphics card. So yeah, these are the adjustments you make as you go along. Again, I'm just foreseeing that if there's a giant graphics card here, getting my fingers into this little hole with a huge card here is gonna be much more annoying. So I'm gonna pause on that. So yeah, let's go ahead and slot in these other things first. So my front IO cable is already on. I'm gonna want, this is my HD audio, and I already kind of did this earlier, right? This one that slots in awkwardly here. I'm gonna make sure I find the missing hole. Oh, this pin is bent a little bit. I'll just bend it back into place. If you find your pins are a little bit bent, no harm, no foul in just bending them back into place just by wiggling it just a tiny bit. Don't do too much because you can snap them. And they just slot just like that. And I'll try to tuck it away a little bit more. It's a little bit too thick to tuck it under. That's okay. I'll just leave it like that. And I'll zip tie that up a little bit later. Next one is this USB port. So remember how earlier I mentioned that the front USB ports are generally really fat and it can be really hard to squeeze in here. In my case, it's not too bad because there's a good size opening here on the side, but on some cases it can be just a little bit too difficult. So yeah, that's why I bought it. I bought it just in case, and in my case, I won't really need it. Again, find the little hole that has nothing, there's no opening, line it up here with your USB 3.0 and just drop that right in. Just like that. All right, and the rest of these are power supply cables. And I'm gonna go ahead and do those now too. So I'm gonna take my motherboard cable, bring that over, and I'm gonna find, you wanna find this clip here. That clip, there's a little indent on the outside of the 24 motherboard pin cable. So you know that this has to slot in this little pin facing outwards, not inwards, okay? So that's gonna help you orient the way that it should drop in. And again, light always helps to make sure you're getting everything right. There's that little click. Okay. Now for my CPU cable. CPU cables are almost always found in the top left of motherboards. All right, so it's up there. It's gonna be a really tight squeeze. And then again, this is kind of where you wanna know, like, how do the clips orient? In my case, the clips are oriented outwards again, or I think it's always like that. Almost. Ah, there we go. Oh, and this is what I meant by the NR200 is noob friendly, because if you were going to use a small form factor case, like a really small form factor case, you need a plan in advance. And you can kind of see that I did not do that at all. All right, I'm gonna route this actually. So the HD audio, I'm gonna route the other side because there's just too much slack. And I figured if I can get it to run down this way, I can run out a lot of its slack and not get in my way as much. So, yeah. Okay. There we go. Graphics card time. Let's go, big boy. Again, make sure that the graphics card pin is facing outwards. Let's get some light in here so I can see where my actual fins are hitting. I'm gonna push it a little bit more outward. Okay, and I think I'm in. And I think I'm good. Okay. All right, so which way do I wanna go? Do I wanna go under? Okay, looks like the P-Slate custom cable cannot go under. It can only go over. So in this case, this one is also going to have to go over as well. So I'll do the easy one first. Man, look how nice this is, man. Okay, if I could just have 3 of these cables, oh, hello. Okay, all good. Yeah, if I just have 3 of those cables, that would be amazing. Oh, one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to secure my graphics card in. So let's make sure I do that first. And this gives it's not just to lock it in, but it also gives the graphics cards much more support as well. So it's not sagging as hard. But all graphics cards in the last few years, unless you get a really short or small one, they're gonna sag, unfortunately. All right, so that first graphics card power line is in. Now to get these 2 on, let's see, how do I want it to bend? To bend just like that. So for those of you guys who aren't as familiar, the 8-pin will look like this. It'll be 6 with 2 pins on it. And that's because sometimes graphics cards can have like, what's 8 plus 6? 14 pins. Sometimes they can have 16 pins. Sometimes they only have 6 pins. They have different pin sizes, and so that's why they kind of give it to you like that, so you can be more flexible with it. If it's a 6-pin, then you can just plug it in and leave those 2 things out, those little 2 extras out. If it's a 14-pin, then you need an 8-pin and then a 6-pin. So that's why it comes like that, in case you were curious. I gotta put the railings back on. Gotta put these side rails back on. And I have to do 1 fan. You can't put a fan here because this cooler is too tall. I'm gonna put 1 fan here, and this fan is going to be doing, what's it gonna be doing? Is it exhaust or is it gonna be intake? I don't remember. I think it's gonna be exhaust. Yeah, I remember reading on a forum that if you have the top set to exhaust, you actually get better temps than if you were to intake, but I could be wrong. In the follow-up, I'll tell you guys which one was better, okay? But yeah, let's go ahead and close this bad boy up. And then we'll see if this thing actually works. It's really late here because I have to make these videos after my kids go to sleep. And so I am so tired right now. I am just so glad that this is almost over. Please work. If it doesn't work, I'm gonna make a video about why you guys should never build your own PCs and why it sucks and everything's overpriced right now anyway. And it looks like I just did something wrong because this is not screwing in anymore. What is happening? I don't even know. What is happening? I've always been curious to do a video like, could I build a PC if I were drunk? I think that'd be hilarious for me to make. I think you guys are watching would be like, this is the dumb, he is so dumb. But I think it'd be a really fun video to make. Let me know in the comments if you guys want to see a video like that. Right, all right. Okay. I'm gonna edit this video so hard so it looks like I made 0 mistakes. That's crazy though, like, shows how frustrating a PC build can be, because you make mistakes even when you build it the same thing for the 2nd time. So I'm gonna do a little bit of cable managing here. Not a ton, because again, like I said, airflow isn't too restricted by doing this. But let me see if there's any way I can tidy this up just a smidge. And there you go, cable managed. This is what I mean, like this case doesn't require a ton of cable management. It really doesn't. It's quite fantastic, actually. Yeah, it's not gonna be pretty, but like I said, I'm using the vent sidings. So here, you guys can see that. There's not a whole lot that you can do because some cables are not long enough to be able to cable manage. And then a lot of stuff can just kind of be tucked away. But yeah, like there's not much I can do about this. If I had a longer cable, I could maybe route it up the side and bring it here. But in this case, I don't. It goes straight up, and that's kind of the only route I have for it. So yeah, I don't know about you. You might not be happy with the way it looks, but I am totally okay with it. And at this point, I just want to see if it works. So I'll be right back. Let me grab a monitor, and we'll see if it works. Okay, so moment of truth. Everything's plugged in. The power supply is on. All right, here we go. We're gonna turn the power strip on. See if the monitor is working. Oh, that's a good sign. Look at that. My motherboard is lit up. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Oh wait, this is the power switch. How did I reach it? It's anticlimactic. Here we go. Nothing. What's going on? All right, so I figured out what the issue was. It turns out that it was this custom 8-pin cable from P-Slate. This was what was preventing my PC from booting. Because now, if I click the power supply on, and we're going, we're running. Let's see if it posts here. The fans are spinning. And there you have it. All right, guys. Oh, and there we go. There's my BIOS. Oh, God. I'm so tired. Oh, my gosh. All right, guys. That's how you build a PC. Just one last thing before we go is going to be the top and how you install a fan. So fans can be installed with screws, but in this case, you can do a screwless installation. And like I mentioned before, this is going to have only one fan in the front here, I believe doing exhaust. At least that's the way I have it set. Yeah, it's in exhaust mode. So in this case, what's really cool about the Cooler Master case is that you're able to just kind of take these pins and you can just stick it into the holes here and just press that down. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put it into one of these fan headers in a minute here. And then you just close that and you're good to go. I'm so glad it's over. All right, guys, have a great night. Stay honest. Bye, guys.